Today, I will be revisiting the idea of the book 0 to 1, of course, by Peter Thiel, co-founder of Palantir. Now, why am I revisiting this book? I've talked about it many times before on the channel. I even have a summary of the book on the channel already. Well, I do believe there are some recent developments in the Palantir story I think could be well served to be re-reviewed against this business case for Palantir in the book 0 to 1. So, without further ado, I want to go through the main points of this book. This is another summary that I was able to analyze and pull apart. I edited down some of the text, and here we are. So let's get right into it. There are 10 takeaways in this summary, the first of which is to imagine what progress the future will bring, and you must be able to view the present differently. So the first part about that being the progress. You have to try and imagine the world way beyond, way out into the future. And I think Palantir has done this. They talk about building the operating system for the modern enterprise, but I really think it is more than that. It's not just for the modern enterprise, it's for the future enterprise as well. So I do think they hit on that point very well. And Peter Thiel then gets into horizontal versus vertical process. And horizontal progress comes from expanding on existing ideas and innovations. Vertical progress, however, comes from creating something new that didn't exist before, like a technology or in Palantir's case, a method of that technology. Put another way, horizontal progress is going from 1 to n, whereas vertical progress is going from 0 to 1. Of course, you are well aware of this if you are a Palantir shareholder. But vertical progress is hard to predict because you have to imagine something that doesn't exist yet, and that's why you can only predict future progress if you are able to see the present differently. And this is really something that I think Palantir has done and has been able to do as a result of the unique background of course, Alex Karp, the CEO. Only a person who can think outside of established conventions can see and change the future. So here we are onto point number 2, and I promise this will tie very heavily back into Palantir. So here we have, monopolies are good for businesses and society. They mean you're doing something better than everyone else. Of course, we are not yet at that point by Palantir, but if you think about it a little deeper, I actually think we are. They have a very unique product offering, one which only competitor really is someone going out and building their own, which is always a competitor. Do you want to buy a phone or do you want to build your own? Sure, there's always that option. It's never going to make sense in that consumer case. But I do think Palantir is nearing the point at which it reaches a monopoly, meaning even the competitor, being someone wanting to build their own offering, is silenced by the strength of Palantir's offering. So Peter Thiel really makes the argument here that a monopoly is a very good thing, and conventional wisdom holds that competition is the ideal economic stimulus, encouraging companies to improve on each other's products. However, it's actually monopolies that drive innovation, and you're just doing something so much better than them that they can't survive. And if you create something that no other company can copy, it's not necessarily a bad thing, of course. Monopolies are good for society because they drive progress, they encourage other businesses to come up with better solutions, and they oust the current dominant company. We can even go as far as to state that having a monopoly is a condition of running a highly profitable business. Of course, Palantir is not highly profitable yet. We investors are hoping that will eventually be the case, but having a monopoly allows you to set your own prices, which in turn ensures high profits. Now, in Palantir's case, they can certainly set their own prices, but they need actual clients to be willing to pay those prices. So I'm sure there is a bit of an equilibrium where they're not charging whatever they want. They really have to stay in a reasonable price range. But I think as their offerings develop, as their offerings expand, and as their technologies and their products and their platforms continue to expand, they will be able to leverage that. If your product is no better than your competitors, you'll have to set your prices low to entice customers away from the competition, which erodes profit margins, as you would expect. Moving on to the next point here. Monopolies thrive thanks to technological advantages, network effects, economies of scale, and great branding. Monopolies share some combination of 4 beneficial characteristics. Now think in your head if Palantir checks off these boxes. First, they have a technological advantage. Their proprietary technology works much better than anyone else's, usually at least 10 times better. Second, monopolies enjoy network effects, meaning the more people are using their product, the more useful it is. Now, I will just jump right in and say Palantir is definitely enjoying network effects. I will get into more on that in a second. This means that newcomers face an uphill battle when trying to lure customers away from monopolies with broad existing customer bases. And third, monopolies benefit from economies of scale. Cost savings gained by producing something on a large scale instead of a small one. Since monopolies are the largest producers in their industry, economies of scale allow them to offer customers more attractive prices than newcomers, further strengthening their position. And finally, monopolies have stronger brands that can't be replicated. So we have these 4 points. Now, does Palantir check these boxes, as I alluded to? Well, first of all, a technological advantage. The technological advantage is, of course, their software, their take on the technology industry, and that which they need to provide as their platforms. So this definitely is a gray area, and I think a lot of it stems from the talent and the talent they're able to attract and retain. But the network effects, that's a little bit more easy to identify. So network effects being what I've talked about many times, I think Palantir is on a very good path to network effects, and client retention, which will be huge in the future. Skywise is one of the biggest examples of a network effect going very, very well for Palantir. Now, moving on to the third one, economies of scale. Now, this is pretty much saying that all of Palantir's research and development, their operating costs that go into the functioning of their business and the improving of their platforms only accelerates their lead in the production of the operating system for the modern enterprise, putting their competitors, so-called competitors, and others interested in doing the same sort of thing farther and farther behind as they gain more clients. It's a flywheel that we've talked about in the past. And finally, strong brands. Palantir is building out that very strong brand, working with some of the biggest and most successful businesses and, of course, governments in the world. So there is, of course, that. When analyzing a business, look at those 4 characteristics to understand if they have or are close to having a monopoly. Moving along to the next point, building a successful, profitable company takes years of work, and it takes time, especially the monopoly part of it. This is especially true when it comes to profits. It can take years for a company, or in this case, of course, the book is about a startup, to become profitable. But even if the company doesn't initially make profits, it can still have value, because value is determined by the profits it will make over its entire lifespan. Not much to expand on there. Startups need to have a solid foundation, the right people and culture, and balanced owner interests. Now, I have a very key point for Palantir in this section. Every company needs to lay a solid foundation to survive in the long run. So when you start out on a long road of building up a business, the first days are absolutely crucial. Another key factor is ensuring that the different interests of the various company owners are balanced. Now, this is where something you've probably heard of by now in Palantir comes into play. So Palantir's co-founders have a majority ownership with Class F shares, meaning even if they sell all their shares or Palantir gets bought out for some reason under this voting rights sort of thing, they would still have ownership of the company. And why is that? Well, Peter Thiel is saying here, the founders and investors may have different interests, but the company should not suffer from such misalignments. So in this example, the founders of the company may want to develop their products patiently, but the board of directors or someone coming in trying to do a hostile takeover, or even not a hostile takeover, just investors in general might want profits as soon as possible, but those interests aren't mutually exclusive and they can sometimes conflict. So it's crucial to find a way to resolve the conflicts early on. And how did Palantir do that? They said, we co-founders are going to have the majority voting rights. If you don't believe us, don't invest with us. So that was pretty easy and definitely something that Peter Thiel weighed in on. Startups should also try to instill a strong culture in their teams because it helps everyone work effectively together. And this is something I have talked about previously. I do think Palantir does it very well. Your products will never sell themselves. Your team needs to do that. Now, this is a fairly controversial statement. So Peter Thiel is saying here that sales is a vital necessity, of course, and there's no product on earth that people will buy without you selling it. That is perhaps a little bit of a stretch, but I get where he's going with it. He says to sell your product effectively, you need good distribution. This not only includes your sales channels, but also the effort and organization it takes to sell your products. To leverage your distribution most effectively, you always need to consider the potential of each client before deciding how much effort you're willing to put into making the sale. And he brings up Palantir as an example. So for Palantir, a single sale usually brings in several $1 million. The CEO has to do the personal selling. And this was earlier on when the book was written many, many years ago. He says, because clients spending such sums expect a certain amount of personal involvement from the seller's executives. But there's this counter argument here where if a sale brings in a few $100,000, that wouldn't be an effective use of the CEO's time. So The question here, and something I was really thinking about, is at what point does Palantir reach the point in their business where when Palantir makes a multi-million-dollar sale, Karp does not need to be involved at all? Now, we've heard about them hiring sales teams, and that is definitely getting built out, but it really is very interesting to see. Are they at that point now? Will they be at that point in the future? Of course, their scale is and will be hindered if Karp needs to be involved with every single deal, and if the deals are coming in left and right, if there is that bottleneck there, or even that bottleneck to growth, not necessarily signing a deal or anything like that. I think this gets taken out of context a bit because Palantir is getting used in this example, and when it was written in the book years ago, and the business is different now, the business is much larger, they have a sales team and such, so I do think it is a different story now, but it is an interesting point, nevertheless, to see when could Alex Karp completely step away? Is it now? Is the sales team ready? Does it need to continue to be built out? Or will it never be that point? Will Karp always have to be the one to sign off on the sale? I want to know what you have to say about that. And this last point here is something I love. Founders tend to be oddballs, but their vision is crucial for any company. Across the board, founders tend to be slightly strange, especially founders of successful companies. This kind of originality is important because founders do far more than just start a company. They give it vision, and this contribution is indispensable. No matter how refined a company's management strategies are, it must have a vision to pursue. Now, of course, this is when I will talk about Alex Karp, his vision, his higher level view, his unconventional background, really what I think. He's the one driving the company. He's the one saying, this is what we need to go after. We need to be immoral. We need to be ethical about it. Moral, I hope you did not just hear immoral. I'm saying moral and ethical. Those standards setting forth, he does not have a technical background. That is not a bad thing. He can still navigate the company and put it in the right direction. Look 5 years out, look 10 years out. What do we need to build? What strategies do we need to implement? He is a higher level thinker, and I really think he is the biggest key player for the company, even though he's not involved in the day-to-day product minutia. So here we are wrapping it up. I hope this video has been insightful. These comments on the summary of the book and also my interpretation of that for what Palantir is doing, especially today. A startup success is not a matter of luck. And again, Palantir is no longer a startup. They're a fully fledged company, $50 billion or whatever market cap. You can pursue the future you want as long as you're able to challenge established conventions. Then, once you obtain a monopoly by being better at something than everyone else, success will follow on its own. Dominate one niche at a time. So this is my question for you. I love to pose questions to you as the audience. Is Palantir dominating one niche at a time, or are they spread too thin? Lots of retail investors want a consumer product, a lower end commercial product, but I did in a video a few weeks ago realize that they do need to just focus and get work done on Foundry and Gotham. Do you think that's what Peter Thiel is saying here? And do you agree with him or not? Again, I hope this video was insightful. Leave all your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.